Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to March 8th, International Women's Day, and this is the CRTA panel, Women in Regulation. I am Adeline Cheng. I am a EY partner. I lead the regulatory compliance and operational risk practice, and I am joined here by an amazing panel of women. Before we begin, I just wanted to make a brief disclosure. While our esteemed panel are employed at some of Canada's top regulatory agencies, the views and opinions they express today, they are speaking in the capacity of their own personal experiences and not in an official capacity. So I'll turn it over to my colleagues here to introduce themselves. Romana?
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. First, I wanted to thank Donna and Canadian RegTech Association for the invitation this afternoon. I'm delighted to be part of this important conversation, and I look forward to the discussion. So a couple of things about myself. I started my work career over 20 years ago. I was a statistician at the University Health Network supporting evidence-based medicine project. And a fun fact, at that point in time, a physician needed to read 17 medical articles a day to stay up to date. And I reckon that today that number is even bigger. But fortunately, we have AI tools that are available to summarize text and probably easier to keep up to date today. I'm math and computer science background. I moved after a couple of years to Schedule I bank, and I worked there for about 5 years in different risk management roles. And in the last one, I was responsible for validating models. I was part of the independent validation team. And then in 2008, I joined OSFI, and most of my OSFI career I spent in model risk division, where I was responsible for review and approval of regulatory capital models. And now I'm the managing director of risk quantification division in the newly formed strategy risk and governance sector. So my team is responsible for advancing stress testing capabilities, both internally and across institutions we regulate. We also conduct macroprudential assessment of vulnerabilities and risks our institutions are exposed to and provide advice on certain policy tools. And we are responsible for maintaining modeling excellence or modeling center of expertise and understanding how models, and in particular artificial intelligence and machine learning, or AI/ML for short, is reshaping Canadian financial services industry. So when I look at my work experience through gender equality lens, I've certainly observed progress over the years. However, we are far from reaching gender equality, as I think we can all appreciate on today's call, and a lot of work still remains in this space. For example, it was not unusual for me, especially at the beginning of my career at OSFI, to be the only woman, and typically amongst the youngest in the meeting room when we had on-site meetings at financial institutions. And then over the years, I noticed a shift to the point where I actually found myself being in similar meetings with women only. So powerful, knowledgeable, and senior executive women, and it was very empowering. But unfortunately, it's enough to look at any report on gender equality, be it one from UN or from World Economic Forum, to see that the huge gap still remains there. And it's saddening, and I find it surprising that in this day and age we have AI programs that can pass medical license exams, yet we have such a huge gender gap, and we don't have kind of fundamental basic human rights across the globe. And I know, my following comment is typically something that people would share at the end, but if there is one message I'd like folks to take from today's discussion, is that we all have a part to play towards closing the gender gap. And I think collectively, if we work together, we can certainly get there faster. And in my opinion, it's things like spending time with your 2-year-old daughter or granddaughter and doing kitchen science experiments to get girls excited about STEM, all the way to re-examining your staffing practices and making conscious choices to bring diversity across a number of dimensions to your teams, and then making sure that you actually have inclusion and that everyone's voice is heard. So I'll pause here and pass the floor to the panelists. Thank you.
Thank you, Romana. Yanny, would you take a moment to introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. So my name is Yanny. I currently work at the Alberta Securities Commission. Prior to joining the Alberta Securities Commission, I was working in finance and economics. working in finance, and my degree was in finance and economics from University of Toronto. I spent a number of years working for BlackRock, as well as TD Securities, before moving into an area called FinTech, which is really, how do we leverage innovative technology to better serve the financial market. And I worked in FinTech down in the US for a number of years before moving back to Canada and joining the Alberta Securities Commission. From a woman's perspective, I am very proud to say that I currently work with a higher ratio of females at work than male. And my core team is 70% female. So my role here at the ASC really is to sort of study how we can infuse technology into modern innovation into the regulatory landscape that can vary from bringing agile framework to project management. How do we infuse data to inform regulatory, to provide insight to regulation, and what are some of the other ways for us to draw data given the current progression in the capital markets. So very, very excited to be here, and thank you so much to the Canadian RegTech Association for inviting me on this panel.
Thank you. And Nathalie.
Yes, thank you, Adeline. And I'm also both very pleased and privileged to join all of you today in an important discussion on International Women's Day. So my name is Nathalie Martineau. I'm a regional director with the Financial Transactions and Reports Analysis Centre of Canada, or FINTRAC to keep it short. And we're a federal agency with the important mandate of facilitating the detection, prevention, and deterrence of money laundering and terrorist financing activity in Canada. We wear many hats, but our agency has two core functions. One is a financial intelligence unit, which receives financial transaction reports from regulated entities and discloses financial intelligence to law enforcement and other partners in support of their investigations. The other is as primary anti-money laundering and anti-terrorist financing regulator and supervisor of 10 regulated sectors, so charged with ensuring they comply with our governing legislation. And in my role, I oversee the delivery of our compliance activities or supervision in the central region in Canada across financial institutions, money service businesses, and securities dealers. And it's been hard to believe 10 years since I joined the public service as a regulator, and I've had the privilege of working for a number of federal agencies, including OSFI as well, and Public Safety Canada, but always in an AML/ATF related role. And prior to that, I spent about 8 years working for Schedule 1 and 2 banks in Canada in credit risk, but mostly in financial crimes operations. And so when I look at my experience through a gender equality lens, very similar to Romana, I think I would say stepping into the role of a regulator was quite the experience, both incredibly rewarding, but also very challenging. In this role, you're often interacting with very senior levels of management and board members across a number of institutions, and you have to quickly learn how to use your voice and manage what can be at times, but not always very difficult conversations. And as a young woman, very early in my career, I'd grown up in a predominantly male-dominated industry, and again, similarly had yet to see a woman sitting at a table in a board meeting. And I admit it felt very intimidating when I found myself having to challenge an institution on their practices or their oversight. But I've also been extremely fortunate to find brilliant women throughout my career who show up to their jobs very authentically, who pull out a seat at the table and unapologetically use their voice. And this, for me, has made all the difference, being able to watch and learn. And today I see amazing women across my organization who inspire me every day, including my staff. And collectively, we now have the opportunity to also pave the way for others. And so I'm very pleased to be joining this important conversation today. Thank you to you for inviting.
Thank you, Nathalie. And as I reflect upon my own career, I've been in financial services primarily for the bulk of it. So I would say about 2 decades. And, you know, similar to the stories that you've shared, sometimes I was the only woman in the room. And now I see more gender balance, even in areas that are traditionally male dominated. So it's really like, it's nice to see the diversity of thought and different backgrounds and different perspectives, because I do think that we are better for it. And I think one of the things that I think about in my own career and where I am and what I want to sort of leave behind is really making it easier for other people behind me to make it through. And so I think this is where it's also important to acknowledge the roles of sponsorship and allies who help, you know, quiet some of the noise and also change the way, because sometimes it's not just women who will make this journey on their own, but also, you know, the reliance on allies to also change the conversations in the rooms that that women are not sometimes invited to. So thank you very much, esteemed panelists. This year's International Women's Day theme is around digital gender equity. And I think having you as panelists here, you all have different perspectives with respect to what that means. And I think in our prep for this conversation, some really, really interesting perspectives around what gender equity is and what it can mean for women is really important. And I wanted to start off with you, Romana, because you brought a couple of ideas to the table around AI and the prevalence of AI and the potential you know, biases that may occur as a result of automation. Wanted to hear a little bit more from your perspective around some of the things that we need to consider around diversity when we start to use intelligent automation and AI. Oh, I think we lost Romana. I think maybe we'll pivot for a moment and you know, switch to Nathalie. We had a little bit of a conversation around the use of technology, digital literacy, and promoting access. I think your experience in FINTRAC shows you sort of a dark side of how sort of technology can be enabled as a sword against gender equality.
Yep, sorry, small technical glitch there, but certainly happy to jump in. Yes, certainly. I mean, when we talk about digital gender equality, of course, very important to raise the issues of persistent gender gap in digital access, underrepresentation of women and girls in STEM education and careers. And I know we'll build on those themes as well. Those do remain major barriers for women's participation in tech design and governance. But I would also add, like, the pervasive threat of online gender-based violence plays a very significant role in creating barriers between women and girls and the digital spaces they do occupy and the extent to which they feel safe in these spaces. And this is certainly the darker side of the conversation, but an important one, I think, to have out loud. Online hate, cyber violence have emerged as extensions of violence against women. And that has also rapidly escalated in the shadows of the COVID-19 pandemic as a lot of our lives have moved and shifted online. Just to bring some statistics in to paint a picture, a 2021 global study which measured the prevalence of online violence against women reported that globally almost 40% of women have personal experiences of online violence, and 85% of women have experienced digital violence against other women. And this can range from sexual harassment to stalking, Zoom bombing, intimate image abuse, trolling, misogynistic or gendered hate speech, amongst other things. And to add to this, digital innovation such as virtual reality and artificial intelligence has also led to the growth of new spaces and new forms of violence such as deep fake pornographic images and videos, for example. And I think what we've seen most disturbing is the use of technology in cases of human trafficking and child sexual exploitation. New technologies and online platforms used to profile, recruit, control, and exploit victims. And here at FINTRAC, we have witnessed these trends increase during the pandemic as well. For example, the overall rate of police-reported incidents of online child sexual exploitations and abuse has been on an upward trend, increasing from 50 incidences per 100,000 population in 2014, when cybercrime data was first collected nationally, to 131 per 100,000 in 2020. And unfortunately, in large part, the victims of these heinous crimes are girls. 7 in 10, 73% of victims identified in online sexual offenses against children were girls aged 12 to 17, 13% were girls under the age of 12. And the impact is very significant. Victims and survivors can experience significant harm to their health and well-being, serious psychological impacts in response to online violence, feeling physically unsafe, lower self-esteem, loss of confidence, et cetera, et cetera. So what can we do better or different? Certainly there's a piece of this that requires a new approach for responding to heinous threats. For example, during the pandemic, a public-private partnership initiative called Project Shadow, co-led by Scotiabank and the Canadian Centre for Child Protection, supported by Canadian law enforcement agencies and FINTRAC, was launched to combat online child sexual exploitation. And the objective of the project is to improve the collective understanding of the threat and to improve the detection and the facilitation of laundering of the proceeds from online child sexual exploitation. But this also comes back to the conversation, and that I think we'll have today, around digital literacy. I'm a mom of 2 young kids, and my oldest daughter, reminds me all too often how strict I am with respect to internet access and use of new devices relative to other moms. And I'll swallow my pride and admit that she's probably right. Many of our kids have unadulterated access to the internet, social media platforms, and more. And the future does require that we remain curious and informed, and that we invest in ourselves and our children to upskill and understand these tools and these spaces better, and to equip ourselves and each other with the knowledge of how to interact with them and in them very safely. And so I think there's a conversation around, digital literacy that's really important in the context of digital gender equity as well.
Yeah, that's a great point. And, as a mother of 2 sort of preteen boys, I'm also learning and doing these things at the same time. And certainly there's no playbook for how to monitor. And I don't know what the right mix is around, like how I do this. And they probably are smarter than I am in terms of the use of technology. But one of the things that it's really important too is this is not just a responsibility for girls to handle themselves, but conversations that I have with my kids around, what did you hear? What does that mean to you? And just creating that dialogue and giving them sort of the responsibility to be in control of their own, like how they show up in an online presence. It may be that you seem anonymous because you have an avatar and that kind of thing, but we also have to be responsible for how we treat other people on the internet, and then also to raise concerns when they don't feel safe. So it's an ongoing discussion, and certainly I don't know if any of the panelists here feel equipped to master this, but certainly I think it's something that a lot of parents are having to deal with in sort of this new world that we live in. Romana, it's nice to see you back again. I hope that your technology issues have, excuse me, have been resolved. Oh, you're on mute.
Can you hear me now?
Perfectly, thank you. I had just thrown you a question with respect to the sort of dark side of AI and the potential biases, and was hoping that you could shed some light with us on what you're seeing and how to be thinking about the potential dark side.
Thank you. And again, apologies, Will, for connectivity issues that I'm having. So I joined through the phone and computer, so hopefully at least one works throughout. And, I think it's, I agree with many things that Nathalie has said, especially around education and parents playing a crucial role with their young children. And I'm actually a very strict mom, and my kids, I think that I'm too strict. But kind of when I think it's very disheartening to see that women make up only 22% of artificial intelligence workers globally. And, that's unfortunately not surprising to me. And I think that stems from the inequality that we have in education. And I was alluding to STEM earlier. And I think, recent statistics suggest that women continue to be underrepresented in those areas. In Canada, I think women make up roughly 25% of women employed in STEM careers. And so why is that? Why aren't more women represented in those areas? I think it's because girls and young women have this perception that their scientific abilities are lower than men's, even though they actually perform fairly well and actually roughly the same in the test. But I think it comes down to women's self-view and perhaps lack of confidence that we can do these scientific things just as well as men can. But kind of coming back to AI and kind of the dark side of it. Unfortunately, I see AI as a double-edged sword. And we all know it can bring a lot of good things in finance, for example. We know we can improve underwriting. It can provide faster lending decisions, develop new strategies, help you identify new products and so forth. In medicine, for example, it can help with diagnostics. Sometimes they can be even better than the doctor can. Diagnose. It can also provide more access and so forth. But then the dark side, and I really want to focus on bias, because there's this, I will say, perception that bias comes from data. And yes, that's obviously one reason why we have challenges with AI, because the data that we have is biased. But that's not the only thing that results in unfair or suboptimal decisions. I think I could, very easily dive into a discussion or monologue rather on proper model risk management. So I'll pull myself back.
That's another seminar, Romana.
Yes, exactly. But kind of just to come back to bias and in AI, other than for example related to data. If you have a programmer or a coder or programmers and coders that all look alike, well, to similar schools, have similar backgrounds, you will likely have a biased AI model. Forget about just bringing that bias from the data. So I think in fact, actually, there's some quite aggravating stats when you look at the Facebook and Google, and I'm not sure how recent this is, but at some point they had fewer than 2% of technical roles that were held by employees with darker skin color. So I think when it comes to really addressing the bias, we really need to think about it from kind of all-encompassing global perspective. It's not just the data. It's the model you select. It's the people that you have throughout the entire model development process. So there is a lot of things that we need to think about and be very deliberate about how we set up our teams.
Thank you very much. You actually raised a good comment around hiring and how when women are attracted or girls attracted to certain fields and so forth. And I see there's this amazing Harvard Business Review article around how to practically close some of the gender gaps. And so they talk about things that C-suite executives need to be doing from an organization perspective, but also there's very, very practical things that hiring managers and you can do sort of locally to support attracting appropriate candidates and bringing in diversity in your organization. And so some of those things are, really considering when you're writing a job description, are you using gendered social norms to be able to describe certain capabilities and activities? And does that potentially weed away sort of a potential qualified candidates? When you're going through the hiring process, are there potential biases in that hiring process that may prevent further candidates from being sort of filtered through and showing up to the hiring manager? And then also, when this morning I was actually speaking on a panel from Access Employment Network, and this is a non-profit organization that helps newcomers to Canada access work in their new home. And there's a lot of discussions around having a specific sort of experience profile. And so sometimes some of the things that we seek in candidates are also act as filters to move away a candidate from consideration because they don't bring in the specific Canadian experience or something that we're looking for. So really asking hiring managers to be really vigilant around some of the filtering criteria, some of the qualification criteria that they use to potentially uncover that sort of unconscious bias that we might have in the recruitment process. Yanny, you had mentioned that you've done a really good job of being able to attract a diverse workplace in your own situation. Can you tell us a little bit about some of your hiring strategies and how you've thought through how you've approached hiring, particularly in a in the fintech space?
Yeah, so actually the team was already here before I joined. We have, I don't quite remember, maybe 7 directors, and out of which 5 were female. So I'm very proud of the fact that we have a diverse team. And I think I read on Bloomberg once, it says that female tend to stay at a job longer because they care about what they're doing. They care about their teammates. They wanted to not drop the ball. So something along that line. And I totally agree with that approach or that study's conclusion. Whereas, females bring a different kind of perspective and they play in a team dynamic in a different way. So with regard to, having different genders and different diverse backgrounds on the team, it really benefits the team by considering a subject from different lenses. So from a hiring perspective, I generally focus on the skill set someone brings in. And I think that, from speaking out of my personal experience, I definitely did not start in STEM, even though I took physics level math when I was studying. But I find STEM and the tech area to be interesting because it allows certain level of creativity. It allows certain level of problem solving, and you can, once you pick a problem area in this world that you wanted to solve and you dive into that area, it's very, tech enables you to get around certain pre-existing hurdles. So I would definitely, if I would choose again, I probably would have gone back to school and into a STEM area. So if, for those females out there who are sort of keen on making a change, making an impact, and potentially, by leveraging tech and the internet and the collaboration of different people, either within an ecosystem or outside of a geographical region, to collaborate in solving a problem, I would encourage everyone to look into, potentially experiment in STEM.
Yeah, that's a funny comment. As you mentioned, if you could go backwards, I think I was thinking the same thing too. When I was growing up, I didn't want to seem too, math smart. I mean, math wasn't something that I felt natural in doing, but if I could go back, I probably would have stayed in like sort of the science and math stream a little bit longer, because I found that I had a natural affinity for it. I worked in finance for part of my life. I've worked in risk for a big chunk of my life, and I've been surrounded by math, but yet I didn't feel that, in my own mind that I was good enough to, thrive in an environment that was math focused. So I wish, Yanny, I had you telling me that I should do maybe, 30, 40 years ago that, I should be encouraged to do math. So I guess that's a good message for the young girls out there, and also, parents or, relatives that have young daughters thinking about what's next for them. I just wanted to turn the topic a little bit around to thinking about, we talked a little bit about the dark side of technology and some of the challenges it presents, but let's talk about the opportunities that technology presents in creating a world that's a little bit more gender equal. One of the things I think, the pandemic taught us is we can actually work from home. And I think there's a number of us who are working from home today, and that we can be quite effective in doing that. And while, there's no doubt that the effects of the pandemic hit women fairly hard in terms of the remote work environment, there were also a significant number of benefits that existed, and also continue to be existed. I don't know, I'll throw it out to the panel here if they want to share a perspective of how the remote work pivot allowed for more gender equality.
Yeah, maybe I can kick it off. I'm happy to jump in. I mean, I think you said it best, Adeline, that the pandemic was challenging for a number of reasons on a number of fronts, and certainly very, very diverse challenges faced by different people in different contexts and circumstances. If you're putting on the lens of a woman or a mother with kids, this I think was both, there was a silver lining and a challenge here as well. I know for myself, we had 2 kids at home learning virtually, and there's competing noise and a bit of chaos and a tremendous amount of having to learn and adapt and pivot to a new space. And I know a lot of women face something similar, but at the same time, there was also this experience of having to redefine what your work-life balance looked like. And for the first time, maybe being able to spend more time with the kids or participate more in activities and having a little bit more of that flexibility. So it's been incredibly important. And I mean, that's I think the positive news of technology and all it can do for us is to introduce a different way of living, different structure, different flexibilities in terms of how you work and how you live and how you engage in your community. And as we think about and continue to progress, returning to the office and new hybrid environments and all of the challenges and benefits that that brings as well, really important not to snap that elastic back and forget that we've made great gains during the pandemic. We've learned a lot. I think we've been able to explore new flexibilities in a way that we've never faced before, which is a huge benefit for many people who are kind of facing those challenges of providing for their little or grown dependents at home, and no longer just rushing and running for trains anymore. I would even maybe bring in the lens of, from a neurodiversity perspective, there's a safer space behind a computer screen at times for those, and a more accessible space to interact with their work life. And that's also been a great gain. So great learnings, and I think positive outcomes coming out of a very, very, very challenging time.
Oh, I think we just lost Romana again. I think she wanted to say something. One of the things that I noticed is, as I was prepping for this panel, McKinsey had done a study last fall with the Lean In organization, and they had noted that during the pandemic, there was, I guess, a lot of pressure on women in such that, women had seriously considered leaving their roles. And this is not, just sort of a certain level of position, but throughout a sort of the managerial spine, that there were women thinking at sort of entry level levels all the way to senior executives, that women were considering the burdens of the pandemic and thinking about, how can they, take care of all of these things. And so the other thing that it made me think about is EY also did a future of work study last year. And one of the things that they found in terms of ongoing engagement and retention was the fact that employers that offered flexibility, the ability to work in a hybrid arrangement, and not necessarily just choose the days that they want, but have the ability to, sort of have both ways, the ability to flex from home on the days that you really needed to take care of a number of things, but then also rejoin the community of the people that you work with in that workplace environment as well. And we're seeing that this is a difference maker for a lot of women. And as you said, Nathalie, where people may show up a little bit differently, maybe a remote work environment is where they can also thrive. So whether it's people who are neurodiverse or actually have physical disabilities, a remote work situation can also be quite a leveling playing field for them to be able to work effectively and to be able to show up in their best self. From that perspective, Yanny, any perspectives on the changing workplace?
Yeah, I think, well, definitely through the pandemic, we've seen a wave of sort of decentralized work. You know, office buildings now is not going to be a continuum going to the future, perhaps, and then certain team members allowed to work from home. I know that certain tech companies are completely working from home. Sorry, my camera is self-adjusting, so sometimes it blurs itself. Hopefully you can still see me. All right. So this is, well, perhaps one of the downsides of work, because your camera sometimes blurs itself, right? And you can't read people's faces. So I hear from a few of my developer friends saying that you know, now they're fully remote and they can work from anywhere in this world, which is probably freedom to some people. I know that some other people prefer, and potentially dependent on their job, people who are working closely with clients may want to, you know, be in an office setting or be closer to either their internal business client or external, you know, business client. So I think it really depends on the role. But for women, I think working from home definitely provides a layer of convenience, especially for women who have kids. And, you know, women who want to have more time saved from commute to pick up a new skill set, take another course, for example. So I think, you know, the new dynamic of the workplace is going to play into everybody's demands in a different way. It's just a matter of how everybody wants to leverage it towards the goal that he or she wants to obtain.
Thank you. Thank you. Romana, I apologize if I'm putting you on the spot. I know that you've had a little bit of some technical issues today. Do you have any perspectives on how remote work can be an opportunity in creating greater gender equality?
So agree with Yanny's points. Unfortunately, I wasn't able to hear all of it. And Adeline, I'm not making it the job of moderating the panel easy on you, being in and out. But I do think there's, you know, opportunity for greater inclusion simply because women can spend more time. Well, at least they don't have to. We don't have to. There is some savings when it comes to traveling to and from work. And I think it's easier when we have small children with various activities that we typically take them to after you know, regular work hours. So for sure there's opportunities, and we can live in different parts of the country. But I do want to highlight that, you know, yes, there's this recognition, there is broader inclusion from the work perspective. But another thing that COVID highlighted is that women experienced bigger economic fallout from the pandemic. I've seen women leaving workforce because they had to take care of elderly and their children. I saw women dropping their studies because they couldn't keep up. Again, it was issues with childcare and so forth. So it's again, even here, a double-edged sword. So I think we just need to be cognizant of that as well.
Yeah, thank you very much. I also think the role of remote work, while it can also benefit women and having that flexibility, it also can benefit everyone in that, you know, men who may have childcare roles can step into them a little bit more freely as well, because they're not, you know, being subject to some of the gendered social norms that people have on the role of men in the workplace, so that they can take on more parenting roles. And we're seeing that, you know, more and more, where fathers want to play a greater role in the lives of their children, and also in, you know, elder care responsibilities. And then just I guess, pivoting into the role of allies in promoting gender equality, want to share and hear your perspectives on how we can talk to our male colleagues around how they can help promote gender equality for all of us. What are some practical things you would offer our allies, whether they be hiring managers, they be leaders, whether they're our relatives and our peers? What advice would you give them?
Perhaps I can start while I'm still online, and maybe so let me take a small step back here, and I would argue that it really starts at home. You know, it's been noted that women tend to do double shift at home, and I think this is where the change needs to start. So in my, or at least in my household, I want to make sure that men understand that when it comes to chores at home, they're not helping, but they're actually doing their part to maintain the household where we live. So I think there's a lot to be said about support or really equal contribution that starts at home, and you know, teaching our sons that from a very early age. You know, throughout my career, I think I was very fortunate. I had very strong mentors and sponsors, and actually most of them were and are men. And I think I was fortunate because they believed in me and my capabilities more than I did. And so, you know, when I said earlier that I think we all have a part to play, I truly believe that. And I think men also have to be, you know, take a step and make an effort to support younger colleagues, younger women, and you know, be that role model. I've seen many men do that, you know, across the organizations where I worked at, and I think more could be done in that space. So I think we need to continue to engage them, and I think, you know, especially when it comes to hiring, but not just hiring, but also, you know, making sure that young staff has that support that they need.
Mm-hmm. Great point.
I can maybe add to that as well. I think allies play a very critical role, and I think sometimes this is understated in the dialogue on gender equality. And back to your earlier point, Adeline, I would especially say in environments where we do still see underrepresentation of women. And I'll provide an example, a bit of a story from my career. I was doing contract work in West Africa for the IMF at a central bank, and had been working really, really hard, probably too hard, to provide a foundation of risk-based supervision in that country. And it was my first time traveling to this country, and I arrived at the central bank on the very first day early and ready to go. And it became very apparent to me very quickly that they had not welcomed many women in their boardrooms. And needless to say, I did struggle to command respect and attention of participants. And on that first day, amongst the laughter and the chatter, a director of the central bank, a very well-respected gentleman, stood up and asked a few of the most disruptive people to leave, and reminded them all that I was there to help and that they were to listen and engage respectfully. And that was a moment that I'll never forget. I was very young, and I still carry it with me now. That's a unique example, but the impact that you can have as an ally to create space and to spotlight and to have the back of a younger woman in her career, or any of your colleagues, shouldn't be understated, what that impact can be for somebody as they're progressing and navigating through their career path. And so I guess that's the message that I would send to anyone who's an ally, who's tuning in today and listening to this. You do play an important role, and maybe you don't see it, but it makes a difference to women around you who are kind of carving their path forward.
Nathalie, that's such a great story. It reminds me of my own story. So, and maybe this is something to be shared with hiring managers. When I was pregnant with my second child, there was a senior role opened at the bank, and I had worked so hard, you know, and I kind of thought, I'm not going to get it because I'm just about to go on mat leave. And for myself, everyone has a different path and different responsibilities. I knew I wasn't going to be gone that long. I was planning just to take, you know, 3 to 6 months off. And my husband was planning to also take some of the balance. And I, went to the hiring manager who, it was also my sponsor, and I said, look, I can do this job. You know that I'm the best candidate for this job. I need you to consider me as a potential candidate for this role. And he said, yeah, but Adeline, there's so many things that need to get done in the next, year or so, and I really can't fail on this. And I said, you won't fail. I promise you will not fail. And he said, okay, I'll take it away. And I thought, okay, well, I shot my shot. And at least he knows how I felt about, my commitment to the role, and that I really wanted to do this work. And then, a couple weeks passed, and he said, I've given you the job. But promise me that we're going to deliver on this. And I said, of course, I've been delivering for you for years. It's not going to change. I've got this. And I remember when he announced, it was at a town hall where they announced some of the new promotions for our team. And I remember standing there, and I was 9 months pregnant, and my boss had announced my promotion, and I felt like there was equal parts of awe and equal parts of disappointment. And there were lots of people who thought my boss was amazing for promoting a woman into a role when 2 weeks later I went on maternity leave. And there were other people who had felt that I had manipulated my way into stealing their job. And so I spent the last 2 weeks before I went on maternity leave trying to, it was almost like an apology tour for having, the gall of accepting the promotion. But at the same time, I remark on the incredible bravery this hiring manager had to promote this woman who is just about to go on mat leave, and from a legal perspective has every right to be out for 18 months. And so I think I remind myself of those moments, and that the moment of bravery for an ally who could say, I am promoting Adeline into this role, she deserves it. And I also am remarked on myself to have, I'm a little bit saddened that I felt the need to apologize for being promoted, but here that's where we are. So I would say to allies, don't be afraid to do the right thing, and to welcome women into the workplace, and hire the best candidate.
Yeah, I can definitely relate to what everybody was saying with allyship and stepping up to the demands of the company. I think that, having worked on Bay Street and Wall Street and different parts of the world, definitely I have seen and experienced quite a few challenges working in a world where a lot of the decisions are made not predominantly by women. So the vantage point sometimes is a bit different from how certain, say, the two genders perhaps may view a subject matter in their approach in different ways. So how do we reconcile that? Or we really wanted people to listen to our voices. So asserting yourself is very important, inserting yourself in the right context. Also, having, I think, one of the other things that I learned from my past experiences was to, if you're going to work within an organizational setting, make sure that, you interview the manager as well. And so the manager can be your ally, someone who understands your situation. I don't have kids at home, so I can't really speak on the home support front. But I do think that, having a supportive partner is also very important to support your career aspirations and the many things that you wanted to do during life.
Thank you, Yanny. Romana, any thoughts?
Sorry, I didn't. I lost sound for a couple of seconds. What was the question? Apologies.
just in general, the role of allyship in promoting gender equality.
Yeah. So as I was saying earlier, I think we all have a part to play, and I think it's very important, especially for young women as they're starting their careers, to have sponsors, to have mentors. I think many of us can serve that purpose, men, women. So I think that's one of the key and necessary ingredients to help close the gender gap. So agree.
Thank you. Thank you very much. There's a question from the chat here, so I'm just going to bring this forward, and I will open it up to any of the panelists to take a stab at answering the question. The question is, any ideas how to mentor the younger generation when many of them prefer to work remotely? Anyone want to take on that meaty issue?
So maybe I can start in thinking of my, kind of early days in connecting with mentors and sponsors. So typically we would go for a coffee, take a short walk or be in a meeting room and, have conversation about work, home and hobbies and so forth. And so actually you can do all of that remotely as well. Maybe you bring your own cup of coffee, or you don't, you miss that part. But, having those frank conversations, being open, I think you can do that as easily as if you were in person.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe I'm missing a bigger picture here, but like that would be my first impression.
Yeah, I completely agree, Romana. And I think certainly, connection feels different when you're face-to-face. It certainly does. But the rules of mentorship aren't different, whether you're face-to-face or you're working remotely. You can still do that very successfully. I think one of the biggest pieces of mentorship, or a successful mentor-mentee relationship, is more about what you come to the table and discuss. Being really deliberate about what is the mentee looking for out of the mentorship relationship, and what can the mentor provide by way of support and advice. And I think that's more important than where you're located and whether you're in person or working remotely.
Yeah, sorry, Adeline, do you have something to say? Okay. So I think that it is, as a mentor, it's very important for the mentor to provide that psychological safety for the mentee to voice their concerns directly and transparently. I try to do it. I try to manage up and try to manage down. So from a mentee perspective, building that trust with the mentor, it's quite important as well. So I think both sides can do some work together.
Thank you. And I might answer the question maybe in a slightly different way. We've been grappling in, before I joined EY, I was working at a bank, and we were talking about what does return to prem look like. And I think one of the challenges with bringing people into the office is really around what do you give them that looks different than what they would have at home. And so I guess what I would offer the person who posed the question is, how do you create a differentiated experience for that person to want to be able to come into the office? What can be a little bit different that would be sort of seen as valuable, and part of that is that human connection. So if it's possible, are you able then to meet in 3D and have a coffee or have lunch, or just even have just sort of that close proximity. I think flexibility is going to be the way that we work, and there's a lot of things that we can accomplish well in a virtual environment, but there's also moments that we can also create when we're together. And so as a mentor, how can we create that moment that is unique and can be had in this in-person environment? So I think there's a little bit of work that we can do. I think of it as, a leader of a team. How do I create and encourage my team to come into the office? So what is differentiated about that day that it looks very different from the other days that they work from home? And part of that is the community that we create and that interaction. So we're almost out of time, and I had just one more question that I wanted to throw out to the panelists, and I can't believe how quickly an hour goes. But just as we think about the conversation, and I guess the path that we've all traveled throughout our lives here. If you could give advice to your younger self, what would it be? Romana.
I can start. Thanks. So one thing I would say to myself is remain authentic. I would start there. So stay true to the things that make you you, and resist the temptation to be like someone else, simply because you think this is the type of personality that is needed to be successful in a particular role or get that next promotion. So stay true to yourself, but then at the same time, work tirelessly to find your voice. I think at this point in my career, I know enough about myself that I know which of the things that don't come easy to me. So so when I hire, among other things, I look for people that will be a good complement to me, my team, so that we truly have that diversity of thought around the table, and diversity across other dimensions. So that will be one advice. I'll pause there.
Great advice, Romana. Yanny?
Yeah, I would say awareness. Try to form this awareness, and Romana previously spoke about bias, and with machine learning and AI, like compared to how machines think, we are becoming more and more aware of the biases that we have ourselves, and having that awareness of how the other people view you, and not to let it impact yourself, but to know how to address these biases and set boundaries. I think it's important, yeah, in real-time fashion.
Thank you. Thank you. And Nathalie?
So many things, but maybe what I would say or focus on is don't be a passenger in your journey. Be proactive and deliberate about seeking support and mentorship. You're not alone. You don't have to face your career by yourself. There's wonderful people who are there and willing to support you, who face many of the challenges that you will face, to have carved many pathways, and who you can learn from. So choose wisely who you surround yourself with. And I would say remain curious to learn from others and to grow.
Great advice. Thank you. And aside from taking Yanny's advice to stay in the STEM stream, the other advice I would give is you never feel that you're ready, but just start. So, there's so many things that happen in our life, and we'll never feel like we've done everything that we can to be ready for an opportunity. But sometimes it's just important to just start by taking one step forward. So with that, I want to say thank you to our esteemed panelists today. I have had a great discussion over the last hour, and it is amazing just to be surrounded by the incredible wisdom and talent of you all. I want to thank everybody who's listening to this webinar, and appreciate your time and your allyship and your thoughts for us. And thanks to the CRTA and Donna for their tremendous support of this webinar today. Thanks very much, and happy International Women's Day.